The battlefield was filled with the sound of swords clashing and men shouting. Smoke curled into the gray sky, and the air smelled like blood and fire. In the middle of the chaos stood a tall male elf wearing gray armor. His armor was scratched and stained, but it still shined faintly in the dull light. On his head rested a crown, silver, sharp, and cold. It marked him not only as a warrior but as a king. His name was Elric, and he had led the Elven army for over 50 years. He believed no one could match their skill in battle, especially not humans. He had seen too many human warriors fall too easily. Weak, emotional, undisciplined. That's what he thought of them. Today, his army had crushed another village on the border. A group of rebels had tried to fight back. Elric watched the last of them fall from his hilltop. Below him, the ground was soaked in red. Horses screamed in the distance. Fire consumed what was left of the wooden homes. One of his commanders rode up the hill, armor dented and hair soaked with sweat. "My king," the commander said, breathing hard. "There was one survivor, a human. He challenged us." Elric raised an eyebrow. "A survivor?" "Yes. He killed 3 of our warriors with a broken sword." Elric didn't laugh, but his eyes narrowed. "Bring him to me." Minutes later, 2 elves dragged a young man up the hill. His clothes were torn, his hands tied. His face was dirty, blood on his cheek, but his eyes burned with something more than anger. They burned with purpose. Elric studied him. "You killed 3 of my soldiers." The young man didn't speak. He stood still, staring back at the Elven king. "What's your name, human?" "Kale," the man answered. His voice was low, tired, but steady. Elric tilted his head. "Why fight when you know you can't win?" Kale looked past him at the field, at the burning village, the fallen bodies. "Because you took everything from me." For a moment, there was silence between them. The wind blew ash through the air. Elric stepped closer. "Then take your chance. Fight me, right here, now." The elves around him turned in surprise. Their king, challenging the human prisoner. It was unheard of. Kale nodded once. "Cut the ropes." Elric smiled, cold and sharp. He unsheathed his blade and signaled to the guards. They hesitated, then obeyed. Kale rubbed his wrists, then picked up the broken sword one of the elves had thrown beside him. The duel began. As they circled each other, the other elves gathered to watch. None of them believed the human would last a minute, but Kale didn't fight like they expected. He moved differently, carefully, with focus. Elric struck first, fast and clean, but Kale blocked it, then countered. And for the first time in a long time, the Elven king felt unsure. Kale stepped back, just avoiding Elric's next strike. The broken sword in his hand felt heavy, but he held it tight. His arm ached, his legs shook, but he didn't stop. Each move he made was careful, as if he had trained for this exact moment. Elric frowned. He was faster and stronger. Yet this human, this lone man, was reading his attacks, blocking, dodging, surviving. "You fight well," Elric said, swinging again. Kale didn't answer. He ducked, then swung low. The edge of his blade scratched Elric's armor. It wasn't deep, but it left a mark. The elves around them gasped. No human had touched their king in years. Elric backed away and looked down at the scratch. His pride stung more than the metal. "Who trained you?" he asked. Kale's eyes stayed on him. "A monk in the mountains. He taught me to fight with nothing, and still win." Elric narrowed his eyes. He moved forward again, this time faster. His sword danced through the air. Kale blocked 2 strikes, but the third caught his shoulder. He grunted, pain flashing through his body, but didn't fall. He had felt worse. Blood soaked through his shirt, but Kale's grip stayed strong. He stepped into the next swing and used the broken edge of his blade to lock Elric's sword. They struggled, faces inches apart. "You should be dead," Elric whispered. "You should be afraid," Cale whispered back. The king shoved him back. Cale stumbled, catching himself just before he hit the ground. Watching from the edge, the elves stood in silence. None dared interrupt. Even they could feel this fight was no longer just a duel. Something deeper was happening. Cale thought of his sister. He could still see her face the night the elves raided their village. She had tried to hide him behind a barrel, whispering for him not to move. She hadn't made it out. He had run that night, but the guilt never left him. Now, every strike he threw was for her. Every block was for the people who had no chance to fight back. Elric came again, furious. His strikes grew harder, less controlled. Cale took a hit to the ribs. He coughed, tasted blood. But he waited for one mistake. And then it came. The king swung high, expecting Cale to duck. Instead, Cale stepped in, turned, and slammed his elbow into Elric's chest. The king lost his balance. Cale didn't hesitate. He raised the broken sword and drove it forward, not to kill, but to stop. The blade hit the king's shoulder, and Elric dropped to one knee. Gasps filled the air. Cale pointed the sword at his face. "You said I could fight. I did. Now what?" Elric looked up at him, breathing hard. For the first time in years, the king had been beaten. And it was by a human he had laughed at just hours ago. Elric's breath came fast. The pain in his shoulder burned, but it wasn't just the wound that troubled him. It was the look in Cale's eyes. Calm, determined, unbroken. He had never seen a human fight like this before. The elves around them waited in silence. No one moved. The king was down, but the fight was not over. Cale lowered his broken sword slowly. "I want peace," he said, "but you must stop your raids. Your war." Elric wiped blood from his lip and looked away, the weight of the crown pressing on his head like never before. For years, he had ruled with strength and fear. He believed that power was the only way to protect his people. But now, faced with Cale's courage, doubt crept in. "Why should I listen to you?" Elric asked, his voice rough. "You are only one man." Cale took a step closer. "Because one man can change everything." The crowd shifted nervously. Many elves had lost family in the fighting, and some wanted to see Cale punished, not listened to. But the king was silent. Cale spoke again, quieter this time. "I lost my home, my family. My sister is gone because of this war. But I do not want more pain. I want a future where elves and humans live without fear." Elric's eyes narrowed. "And how do you propose that happens?" "Stop the fighting. Talk to us. Learn why we fight back. Don't kill us before you understand." The king looked at the burning village below, at the bodies lying on the ground. Maybe Cale was right. Maybe it was time for something different. Elric stood slowly, ignoring the pain in his shoulder. He pulled off his crown and held it out to Cale. "Take it," he said. "If you are strong enough to win it with your sword, you are strong enough to carry its weight." Cale hesitated, but he reached out and took the crown. It was heavier than it looked, cold and hard against his skin. "I will not wear it for power," Cale said. "I will wear it to stop this war." Elric nodded, the fight gone from his eyes. He turned and raised his hand to the elves around him. "We will listen," he said. "We will try peace." Some elves cheered quietly, but many looked angry. Not everyone was ready to stop fighting. Cale knew this was only the beginning. Peace would be hard. Some would never accept it. But today was a start. He looked out over the battlefield, the fire still burning, but the fighting stopped. Elric stood beside him, no longer an enemy, but a man who understood. Cale's heart was still heavy with pain and loss, but for the first time in a long time, there was hope. He would carry this crown not as a conqueror, but as a guardian of peace, and he would fight for that future every day. Cale adjusted the heavy crown on his head, feeling its cold weight press down on him. It wasn't just a symbol of victory. It was a symbol of responsibility. The elven warriors who had once mocked him now looked at him with surprise and suspicion. Some eyes held anger, others curiosity, but all of them knew things would change. Elric stood beside Cale, his gray armor still smeared with dirt and blood. Though his shoulder hurt, he carried himself with a new kind of respect. The war was over for now, but the real fight was just beginning. The battlefield was quiet except for the crackling of small fires. Soldiers from both sides tended to their wounded or gathered their fallen. Cale's heart ached as he saw faces filled with pain and loss. This was the cost of years of fighting. "We have much to do," Cale said quietly to Elric. "We need to rebuild, to heal." Elric nodded, "And earn the trust of our people." Cale looked at the soldiers around them. Some still gripped their weapons tightly, not ready to lower their defenses. Others whispered among themselves, wondering how a broken human had taken their king. "Change is hard," Cale said, looking out over the field. "But if we don't try, more lives will be lost." He began walking among the elves, his steps steady. He met their eyes, some cold, some hopeful. He knew some would never accept him as their leader. But he would prove himself by his actions, not just his words. Elric followed quietly. He was not ready to give up his crown entirely, but he understood that Cale was the key to peace, maybe even to a future where elves and humans could live side by side. Later, as the sun began to set, Cale gathered the leaders from both sides in a large tent. They sat around a rough wooden table, the air thick with tension. Cale spoke first. "We cannot undo the past," he said, "but we can decide what comes next. We will create laws that protect both elves and humans. No more raids, no more bloodshed." Some nodded. Others looked away. "I want to hear from you," Cale continued. "What do you need to stop the fighting?" For hours, they talked. Old wounds were spoken aloud. Promises were made. Fears shared. Slowly, a plan formed. A plan for peace and fairness. Outside the tent, Elric stood quietly. He watched Cale's face as he listened and spoke. There was something different about this human. Something powerful, not in muscle or sword, but in heart. When the meeting ended, Cale stepped outside. The sky was dark, stars shining faintly through the smoke. He looked up, thinking of his sister, the reason he had fought so hard. He whispered, "This is for you." Elric approached. "You carry a heavy burden." Cale nodded. "And I will carry it as long as I must." The war was over, but the real journey had only just begun. Together, they would try to build a future where no one had to fight to be free. The days after the battle were quiet, but tense. Cale walked through the village, watching elves and humans work side by side. Some smiled, others kept their distance, but no one ignored him anymore. The broken sword hung at his side, a reminder of what he had fought for. Elric joined him on one walk, the gray armor less bright but still proud. "They don't trust me yet," Cale said quietly. "Trust is earned," Elric replied, "not given." Cale nodded. He could feel the weight of every eye watching him, waiting for a mistake. If he failed, the war could start again. One afternoon, a small group of elves gathered near the edge of the village. They spoke in low voices, eyes sharp and suspicious. Cale heard their words even though they tried to hide them. "He's a human. How can he lead us?" one said. "He's not one of us," another whispered. Cale's heart tightened. He knew some would never accept him. But he didn't have time to be angry. The future of many people depended on what he did next. That evening, Cale called a meeting. He stood before a crowd of elves and humans, young and old, warriors and farmers. "I know many of you doubt me," he said. "I understand, but I want to make this place safe for everyone." He told them about the plan they had made, the promise of peace, the laws to protect all. "We will rebuild. We will grow stronger together." Elric stepped forward and spoke too. Cale fought not just with his sword, but with his heart. "We must follow him because this is our chance." Some clapped, others remained quiet. But the mood shifted. Over the next weeks, Kale worked hard. He helped rebuild homes, planted fields, and spoke with families who had lost everything. He did not wear the crown all the time. Sometimes it was a heavy reminder of the pain beneath the hope. One evening, Kale found a little girl sitting by a fire, tears on her cheeks. She looked up and saw him. "Are you the king?" she asked softly. "I am," Kale said, sitting beside her. "Will the fighting stop?" she asked. "I will do everything I can," he promised. She smiled faintly, and Kale felt a small spark of hope. But not all was easy. Some nights, Kale heard whispers of rebellion. Some elves and humans still wanted revenge. They believed peace was weakness. Elric warned him, "There will always be those who fight against change." Kale understood. Then we fight for peace harder. One cold night, as Kale rested in his tent, a messenger arrived with news. A group of rebels planned to attack the village at dawn. Kale didn't hesitate. He gathered his warriors, elves and humans alike. "Tonight we protect our home," he said, "not with hatred, but with strength." As the moon rose, they waited quietly. When the rebels came, Kale met them in the darkness. The fight was fierce, but Kale's side held strong. No one wanted to die again. When the battle ended, Kale looked at the faces around him, tired but alive. This was the fight for peace, and he would never stop. The morning after the rebel attack was quiet but heavy. Kale walked through the village, checking on the wounded. Some elves and humans had minor cuts. Others had deeper injuries. Kale's heart ached every time he saw pain caused by hatred. He stopped at the small shelter where the injured were resting. A young elf boy, no older than 10, lay on a cot. His face was pale, but his eyes opened when Kale approached. "You're safe now," Kale said softly. The boy gave a weak nod. Kale looked around the room. Elves and humans sat side by side, helping each other. It was a strange sight, but it gave Kale hope. Elric joined him, his steps slow but steady. "We stopped the attack, but there will be more," he said. "They don't want peace." "Then we keep fighting," Kale answered. "Not with swords, but with our will." The days grew busier. Kale and Elric worked to strengthen the village defenses, but they also held meetings. They invited leaders from nearby villages, both elf and human, to join their cause for peace. Not everyone came willingly. Some sent spies or saboteurs. Kale learned to watch carefully, trusting only a few. One afternoon, Kale met with an elder elf named Silas. Silas was quiet but wise, known for helping settle old disputes. "Why do they hate us so much?" Kale asked. Silas looked out over the fields. "Fear. Years of war have left deep wounds. Many believe that trusting outsiders will only bring more pain." Kale nodded. "How do we heal that?" "With time, and with actions that show we need peace." Kale knew Silas was right. Words were easy, but trust took years to build. That night, Kale sat by the fire, thinking about the future. He thought about the children growing up in this new world, elves and humans who might never know war if they fought hard enough. Elric came to sit beside him. "You carry the weight well," he said. Kale smiled faintly. "I don't carry it alone." They talked quietly until the stars filled the sky. Weeks passed, and Kale's message spread. Some villages sent representatives to join them. Others stayed silent, watching. One morning, a messenger arrived with a letter from a distant human village. They wanted to meet and talk peace. Kale felt a spark of hope. Maybe this was the start of something bigger. But he knew danger still waited in the shadows. One evening, as Kale walked the village walls, a shadow moved quickly. Before he could react, a dagger flashed toward him. Kale dodged just in time. The attacker disappeared into the night. Elric rushed to his side. "They want to scare you." Kale tightened his grip on his sword. "They won't stop us." From that night on, Kale was more careful, but he never stopped leading. He believed that even in darkness, light could grow, and he was ready to fight for that light every day. Days passed since the dagger attack, and the village grew quieter. Kale stayed alert, but he didn't want fear to rule his people. Peace needed courage, and Kale wanted to show that courage every day. He spent mornings visiting homes, listening to worries and hopes. Some villagers still held old grudges, but others began to smile again. Children played together, elves and humans, sharing stories and laughter. This was the peace Kale dreamed of. Elric watched all of this with a mix of pride and doubt. He had once believed strength came only from war, but now he saw a different kind of power, one that built, not destroyed. One afternoon, a messenger arrived with a heavy pouch. Inside were letters from distant lands, messages from leaders who wanted to join Kale's peace effort. Some were elves, others humans. They all hoped for an end to war. Kale read the letters carefully. The hope was real, but so was the risk. Many of these lands were far from the village, and traveling there was dangerous. "We need to send envoys," Kale told Elric. "People who can speak for us and build trust." Elric nodded. "But be careful. Some may not want peace." Kale chose a small group of trusted warriors, elves and humans together, to travel with the envoys. They trained every day, learning about each other's cultures and languages. Kale wanted them ready for anything. Before they left, Kale gathered the village. "This journey is important," he said. "We represent more than ourselves. We carry hope for a better future." The villagers cheered quietly, understanding the weight of his words. As the envoys prepared to leave, Kale felt a mix of pride and worry. The road was long and filled with danger, but it was a step forward. While the envoys traveled, Kale worked to strengthen the village. He met often with elders and warriors, planning defenses, but also schools and farms. He wanted the village to grow in peace and strength. One evening, Elric came with news. The envoys had reached a nearby kingdom and were invited to speak with its leaders. This was progress. "We must be patient," Elric said. "Peace is not built overnight." Kale agreed. He thought of his sister again, how her memory pushed him forward. Then, one morning, a runner arrived with urgent news. The envoys had been attacked near the kingdom's border. Several were injured, and the envoys had to retreat. Kale's heart sank. This was the danger he feared. He called a meeting with the village leaders. "We will send help," he said. "We cannot let fear stop us." Elric added, "We fight not with swords alone, but with our will." They prepared supplies and warriors to support the envoys. Kale led the group himself. As they set out, the village watched silently, hoping this journey would bring peace closer, not push it farther away. Kale rode with determination, knowing the future depended on every step forward. Kale's group moved quickly through the forest, the sun barely breaking through thick leaves. The journey was hard. Dirt roads were rough, and the cold nights bit at their skin. But Kale didn't complain. Every step brought them closer to the envoys in trouble. Elric rode beside him, alert to every sound. "We are close," he said, pointing toward a narrow path. Kale nodded. "We must be ready for anything." They reached the edge of a small village where the envoys had last been seen. The village was quiet, almost empty. The air was thick with fear. A woman stepped out from a shadowed doorway. Her face was tired but determined. "You are the king," she said, looking at Kale's crown. "We need your help." She introduced herself as Lyra, a messenger who had escaped the attack on the envoys. She told them that a group of bandits had ambushed the envoys, hoping to stop the peace talks. Many were hurt, and some were captured. Kale's jaw tightened. "Where are they now?" "In the caves to the east," Lyra said. "But the bandits are strong and well-armed." Kale gathered his warriors. "We will not let these bandits destroy our hope," he said. "We fight to save our people and our future." That night, they planned their attack. Kale studied the map carefully. The caves were deep, with narrow tunnels that could trap them. He decided they needed a surprise strike at dawn. As the first light touched the sky, Kale led his group quietly toward the caves. The forest was still, but Kale's heart beat fast. He thought of the envoys waiting for help. They reached the cave entrance and waited. Then, with a signal, they'd moved inside. The air was cold and damp, the sounds of dripping water echoing in the dark. Kale held his sword ready. Every step was careful, every shadow watched. Suddenly, a bandit appeared, but Kale's sword was faster. The fight had begun. The battle in the caves was fierce. Echoes of clashing blades bounced off the walls. Kale fought with everything he had, pushing forward to find the captured envoys. Finally, they reached a small chamber where the envoys were held. Some were tied to rocks, others sitting weak but alive. Kale's heart lifted. They were safe, for now. "We are here," Kale said softly. "You are safe." They freed the envoys quickly, but the bandits were not finished. A loud noise warned that more were coming. Kale and his warriors prepared to fight their way out. They moved fast, using the shadows and narrow tunnels to their advantage. Outside, the sun was higher now, shining on a group ready to protect hope. When they reached the forest, Kale looked at the freed envoys. Tired but grateful, their faces showed new strength. "This is why we fight," Kale said. "To protect those who want peace." Elric smiled. "And we will keep fighting." The group returned to the village, their spirits lifted. The journey was far from over, but today was a victory. Kale knew that every step, every battle, brought them closer to the future they dreamed of. A future where no one would live in fear. Back in the village, news of the rescue spread quickly. Villagers gathered to welcome the envoys, their faces full of hope and relief. Kale watched quietly from the edge of the crowd, feeling the weight of the crown on his head. This victory was small but important. It showed that peace was possible. Elric came up beside him. "You did well," he said. "The people see that." Kale nodded but knew the hard work wasn't over. There are still those who want to tear this apart. The envoys told stories of the bandits' fear of losing power and control. Kale understood. Peace threatened their way of life, and they would fight to keep it. Kale called a meeting of all the leaders, elves, humans, and others who had joined the peace effort. They sat around a large wooden table, tired but determined. "Our enemies will not stop," Kale said. "We must be ready. But we cannot answer hate with hate." The room was silent. Silas, the elder elf, finally spoke. "We need to build stronger bonds between our people. Trust will protect us more than swords." Kale agreed. "We will hold festivals, share stories, and teach our children together. We will create a future where peace is not just a dream." Elric added, "And we strengthen our defenses. If war comes, we stand united." They made plans for both peace and protection. It was a delicate balance. After the meeting, Kale walked through the village. He saw children playing, farmers working the fields, and warriors training together. It was a new beginning. One afternoon, a messenger arrived with news from a distant kingdom. They wanted to join the peace talks. This was a sign that Kale's vision was spreading. But Kale remained cautious. He knew not all invitations were sincere. Some could be traps. He sent scouts to watch the kingdom, gathering information quietly. As days passed, Kale felt the village grow stronger. The wounds of war slowly healed, but the scars remained. One evening, Kale stood on the village wall, watching the sun set behind distant mountains. He thought of his sister, whose memory pushed him forward. Elric joined him. "You carry the hopes of many," he said. Kale looked at the stars beginning to shine. "And I will carry them as long as I live." Suddenly, a scout arrived, breathless and worried. "A large army approaches," the scout said. "They come from the kingdom we watch." Kale's heart raced. The fight for peace was not over. He quickly gathered his warriors. "Prepare for battle," he said. "But remember, we fight to protect peace, not to destroy it." As night fell, the village readied itself. Fires were lit, weapons sharpened, and prayers whispered. Cale stood tall, crown gleaming in the firelight. This was the moment that would decide their future. He thought of all they had built and all they still hoped for. Tonight, we fight for tomorrow. 4.1 Mini, you said. The village was tense as the army drew near. Cale stood on the wall, watching the dark line of soldiers move closer. The moon was hidden behind clouds, making everything feel colder and more uncertain. He could hear the low murmur of his own people below. Elves and humans alike prepared for what might be their hardest fight yet. Cale felt the weight of the crown heavy on his head, but also the hope it carried. Everyone ready? Elric asked, standing beside him. Cale nodded. We fight together, or we fall together. The enemy army stopped just beyond the forest's edge. They shouted orders and moved like a storm ready to break. Cale's warriors held their ground, steady and silent, waiting for his signal. Then, with a deep breath, Cale raised his sword. For peace, he shouted. The battle began with the clash of steel and the roar of warriors. Arrows flew through the air, and the ground shook with the weight of horses charging. Cale fought in the thick of it, every move careful and strong. He saw friends and foes fall, but he did not stop. He pushed forward, leading his warriors with fierce determination. Elric fought beside him, their swords moving like a dance. "We hold the line," Elric yelled. Cale's eyes caught a group of enemy soldiers trying to flank them. He charged with a small band of warriors, cutting through the shadows. The fight was brutal. Cale could feel his strength fading, but he kept going. The crown on his head felt like fire, a symbol of everything he fought for. As the battle raged, Cale saw the enemy leader, a tall figure in dark armor, moving toward him. They met in the middle of the chaos, swords clashing with loud strikes. Cale fought with all he had, but the enemy was strong and skilled. The fight tested every part of him, his body, his mind, and his will. Finally, Cale found an opening. With one swift move, he disarmed the enemy leader and forced him to the ground. The battlefield grew silent for a moment. Cale looked down and spoke quietly. "This war ends now." The enemy soldiers hesitated. Then, slowly, they lowered their weapons. The village warriors cheered, but Cale stayed focused. He wanted this peace to last. After the battle, Cale called for a council with both sides. They spoke honestly, sharing fears and hopes. It was not easy, but they agreed to work toward lasting peace. Cale felt a deep tiredness, but also a new strength. He had fought not just for power, but for a chance to build a better world. Elric clapped him on the shoulder. "You changed everything." Cale smiled, thinking of the long road ahead. "We changed everything. Together." As dawn broke, the sun warmed the village. Cale looked at the faces around him, elves and humans, united at last. The crown was heavy, but it no longer felt like a burden. It was a promise of peace, hope, and a future worth fighting for. Cale knew the battles might come again, but he was ready, not just as a king, but as a leader who believed in the power of peace.